I'm gonna make him an offer he can't refuse.
I'm not even supposed to be here today! Oh, fuck you!
Come on, you want me to drive? You're supposed to be suicidal. Remember, I'll
Anybody
drive.
a drive?
Get in the car. Fuck me in the ass. Fuck you, you stupid cunt.
Hey everyone, it's Don G. Corleone here, and I'm kicking off a brand new review series, and it's going to be for a horror series because we have a 6 of these coming out this month on May long weekend. And this is going to be for the first installment of the series, the one that kickstarted it all, for the Final Destination series, Final Destination, the first one, which was directed by James W.O.N.G. Not James Wan as in W-A-N, the director of Saw. A different James Wan. James Wan, in a way, called James Wan. Named James Wan. Who was one of the creators of X-Files. And was also one of the people involved in making the 2006 Black Christmas remake. And this was the film that kickstarted this iconic horror series. So, what is the plot of the first installment? Well, Alex is boarding a plane to France on a school trip, and when he suddenly gets a premonition that the plane will explode, then shortly after Alex, a group of students and his teacher are thrown off the plane because Alex starts a fight with one of them named Carter. To their horror, the plane ironically does explode. So Alex now has to work out Death's plan, and each of the survivors falls victim, and trying to prevent the next death, and also has to pretty much dodge the FBI, because they believe he caused the explosion. So, as for my reaction to Final Destination, the first film, well, the first Final Destination has always been a fun little campy B horror film, with the creative concept about some kids escaping a plane before it blows up and then they all die one by one, and the one who predicted it has to find a way to put an end to this problem before it goes after him and his other friends. Yeah, this was pretty much a film that I watched in high school, and when it comes to the first film, I like it. I wouldn't say I love it, but I like it. It's a nice little campy B-teen horror film. Especially for those that are getting introduced to the horror genre, it's a nice little way to start off horror. How was this made? Well, this began as a spec script that was written by Reddick for an episode of The X-Files in order for Reddick to get a TV agent. A colleague at New Line Cinema persuaded Reddick to write it as a feature-length film. Then Juan and Morgan, the X-Files writing partners, they became interested in the script and agreed to rewrite and direct the film. So this was Juan's first directing debut, and filming took place in New York City and Vancouver, BC, not Vancouver, Washington. And additional scenes got filmed in Toronto and San Francisco. Then, after the film was officially completed, officially the film was completed, shot, and I guess advertised, it was released on March 17, 2000, and became a financial success and made $10 million on its opening weekend and won $12 million worldwide. However, though, despite this, the movie got negative reviews from critics upon release, but that didn't stop it from getting good reviews from audiences and horror fans, and it received the Star Award for Best Horror Film and Best Performance by a Younger Actor for Devon Sawa's performance. The commercial success and impact on pop culture spawned the Final Destination franchise, which received now 6 sequels, as well as a series of novels and comic books. The first sequel would be released 3 years later on January 31st, 2003. Like, you can tell this was originally supposed to be a TV episode because much of the acting feels reminiscent of daytime TV shows. A lot of the dialogue is awkward and contrived as ways to clarify plot points and move the story forward. The editing does kind of fail to convey the right mood, and the dramatic moments do come off as humorous, while the humorous moments feeling at odds with the rising tension. And because with most teen horror flicks, it's not what most would consider a great film. Good film, but not really great. Which is what I think of the film. And the idea that the killer can be fabric of life itself, it does instill a good type of fear in the viewer, because that's something you wouldn't expect from a horror film. Like everyday objects like kitchen appliances and fishing rods can be something to be feared, as they can lead to real-life deaths if they're caused by fatal accidents, and at least in the sense that you can't trust any aspect of the mundane world around you. And though many of the deaths do feel kind of ridiculous, but also entertaining in a sense, they're also pretty realistic deaths in a horror film that any horror film could show at the time this came out. Freak accidents happen every day, and most of us don't really know like when we're ever going to die, because the world around you kind of like feels like it's kind of out to get you at any time. So the fear comes through in the character's distrust of everyday life and struggle against the inevitable. And that's how we do kind of feel like in real life. In real life, we could be a victim of stuff like this. We could be a victim of bathroom accidents. We could be a victim of knives falling down or computer screens exploding and slashing our throats. We could be victims of actual car accidents caused by train crashes or car accidents in general, or even plane explosions. This film portrays all that perfectly well. The careers of this movie have no such restraint, and death scenes even feel freakishly violent and intricate that they're often interesting in and of themselves. Like, just imagine the force of death, like the whole phenomenon of accidents, not just the whole Reaper, becoming like pissed because it missed a few victims it was going to have in its plan to cause all these deaths in the first place. Hence the plot, where this class is getting on this whole plane trip to Paris. One of them has this vision that the plane's going to blow up, freaks out, starts a fight to get kicked off the flights, along with a few fellow classmates and teacher. And the plane does ironically explode, but Death clearly does not like this and goes after the survivors. So, like, it's safe to say that every individual would have different feelings about death. Some fear it, others still deny it. Some are kind of weary about it though. Some are kind of a little pissed that they missed something they wanted to do. But even though that saved their life, Final Destination is kind of a perfect thriller for skeptics, and detailing really 7 confusing individuals that accidentally escaped their demise and discovered the impossibility of defrauding their destined time. The film's atmosphere really does kind of provoke some cringe through this omnipresent force like stalking the characters. It produces audiences' participation where the Grim Reaper is footsteps away from anybody. So how do we start the film? Well, we start off with our lead character, high school student Alex Browning, played by Devon Sawa, who is about to go on this with his classmates for the senior trip to Paris from John F. Kennedy Airport. He boards Volare Airlines Flight 180, a Boeing 747. Although before takeoff, these two girls ask if Alex can switch seats with them, and so he does. But what we are about to find out is what's going on is currently this premonition he's having. Before he gets asked to switch seats, he's having a premonition of a mechanical failure that leads to an inner explosion that kills everyone on board. So we cut back to the girls asking to switch seats, and he immediately realizes that actually everything's about to happen. Events from his vision begin to occur in reality. He then panics. He causes a fight with his rival Carter, and so Alex Carter and Alex's best friend Todd, Carter's girlfriend Terry Cheney, teacher Valerie Luton, students Billy Hitchcock and Clear Rivers all get kicked off the plane. But none of them, except for Clear, believe Alex about his vision, but then the plane explodes after takeoff. Then the survivors get interrogated by FBI agents, Wayne and Shrek, and Wayne and Shrek then become suspicious of Alex. And that is where our film takes off. Like, the film wastes no time depicting a setup. Whether the rushed opening leads to lack of character development, or the characters' personalities are clear, we don't really feel too much remorse for most of them, because some of them are kind of douchey. The ones you do kind of feel remorse for are Alex, Clear, Todd, and Billy, because they are likable. However, the teacher and Carter, honestly, you don't really feel sympathy for either of them, because, like, after the whole deaths, like, they become kind of assholes towards Alex, so even though Alex technically ended up saving both of them, Carter spends most of the film whining, bitching, great, he wrecked my trip to Paris, no, I can't go to Paris now, so I'm just gonna be an asshole. Like, oh my god. Who gives a shit about getting kicked off for a plane trip to Paris? If I got kicked off a plane trip to Paris, I wouldn't give a fuck because screw Paris. Screw Paris. Paris looks like a boring-ass place to go to. If I wanted to go around the world, I want to go to New York. Or Mexico. Any of those any day. Screw Paris. A rep. I never in my life wanted to go near the fuck to Paris. Whereas, like, the characters' personalities are clear, so yeah, we don't really feel too much remorse for 2 characters. The other four I do kind of feel some remorse for. In a way. Even though, like, some of them don't die. Billy, sadly, though, does die. Todd, sadly, does die. Those 2 I actually did feel sorry for. Because those 2 were pretty likable characters. Like, Billy's just a guy that kind of got there at the wrong time, and you could tell he did have some sympathy for Alex. Todd even had some sympathy for Alex. Like, Clear even had some gratitude for Alex for pretty much saving her life. Like, the dramatic premise is horrifying and revealing, and it plays like an extended X-Files episode, because this was written like by X-Files people, and was originally going to be an X-Files episode without paranormal detectives. Final Destination is creative and full of variety, and you witness the plane crash from 2 different perspectives, like as a passenger and as an observer. Like as a passenger when you see the premonition, then as an observer when it turns out it all actually ends up coming true. And there are some overlooked characters in Final Destination, like the adults that don't really have an IQ score in the mid-90s, or the teenagers' parents that do get left out of most of the story, like Alex's parents, we don't really see much of. Clear's parents, we barely see at all. Like the other characters' parents, we don't really see all much of. There's this briefly creepy appearance of this mortician that's played by aka Tony Todd's character. May Tony Todd rest in peace. Like another one of his most iconic roles. But sadly gets short-circuited by the plot. Sadly, like, it's sad like Tony Todd only has like 1 scene in most of these films. The only one that he actually has most screen time in is Final Destination 5. Right there, which is kind of sad though, because I wish he had more of a role in these films. Like, this is one of his most iconic roles, and every time he appears, he's only for like 1 scene. Or his voice work for the 3rd one. And like he's one of the many characters that actually does make the series iconic. And ends up explaining a lot of the plot to the viewers. And made Tony Todd rest in peace. Tony Todd was a legendary actor. Whether he had roles like Candyman, whether he had roles like Venom in Spider-Man 2, the PS5 game, or whether it was Hatchet 2, where he had more of a role, and like Hatchet 1, where he was just a cameo. And Tony Todd seemed like a guy that was very passionate about his work. And had a very iconic, intimidating, sinister voice. Because whenever he played a bad guy, anytime he played a bad guy, he actually perfectly made this bad guy intimidating. Because this bad guy he played meant serious business. Candyman was like an actual legitimate threat. Right there. And sadly though, and of course when he plays the Fallen, he seems like Sally Reg of the Fallen, when he voiced the Fallen, he actually seemed like a guy that was going to be really intimidating threat. He was going to be your newest threat. Megatron was gone. Well, Megatron was probably going to be dead most of the film. Maybe he was going to be the next big bad. That was going to be the big bad of the trilogy. Of the Michael Bay trilogy. But sadly, Michael Bay fucked up Revenge of the Fallen. That really sucks, because that guy could have been the terrific main main antagonist for that whole series. It didn't need to just be Megatron. Yeah, Megatron is kind of like one of the central big bads, but they could have did something refreshing there. Like, you could have just kept Megatron dead for all of Revenge of the Fallen, and then don't have him get revived until the very last shot of the film. Right there. Like, he could have just came back then. That could have been a chilling cliffhanger of Revenge, is when he gets revived. And the Fallen could have been the one to kill Optimus Prime. Like, that had potential. That had potential to be the Decepticons film. But back to this review. The film that was written by Jeffrey Reddick and Glenn Morgan and director James Wong never really explains why Alex's character has all these visions of the upcoming disasters. He just kind of really has them. And the idea does make for an intriguing story, but there's like no interesting subplots, or a majority of side characters, except for Clear, just aren't really all that interesting. Right there. Except for like the other interesting side character is Tony Todd's character, and he's like 1 scene, and that's it. So without being backed up by supporting stories, the filmmakers kind of like try to justify the character's reasons for being, but you don't really get much of those. And Wolin seems to overlook Alex's illusions, and it's a concept that just holds the entire movie together. And Final Destination, like, this is a low-budget film, and it actually does look pretty good for low budget. It's slickly shot, it's very atmospheric, and the plane effects of the Flight 180 plane scene and explosion are quite impressive. And music score has a suitable eeriness. The film, it's never dull of the vast majority of the time fun and suspenseful, and its elaborately creative death scenes are ingeniously unsettling. And the film's highlight is definitely the opening Flight 180 scene. And it does well with provoking fear in anyone with a fear of flying that's going to have their fear exemplified. And also would do well in making a viewer more terrified of flights. This is somebody that actually gets pretty nervous of flying myself. Because this is a scenario that can really happen. This can actually happen in real life to anybody. Like, several people have died in plane crashes. Even composer James Horner, who sadly was involved in a plane crash, and he sadly died. One does kind of do well with the directing the portrayal of death, and it is a pretty interesting, well done portrayal of death itself. So, 39 days later, a memorial service is then held, and after attending for the victims, a chain reaction then starts to happen to each of the survivors. Todd accidentally gets hanged in a shower, and that sucks because Todd actually was a pretty sympathetic character, and I wish he wasn't the first one to die. If you want to know who I wish was the first one to die? I wish it was either the teacher or Carter. Either of them should have died first, because the teacher wasn't that interesting of a character, and plus, after the death scene, and when, of course, Alex tries to comfort her, she just acts rude to him, and says, like, don't fucking talk to me, you scare me enough, like, dude, this is one of your own students, pal. This is one of your own students. That's one of your own students that just saved your life, and this is how you repay them? Like, imagine being in Alex's shoes, and your own teacher tells you this shit. Like, wouldn't this just stick with your head for life? Near the end of class, like, wouldn't that just stick with you for life? You going on this class trip, and you save your teacher in an accident, and the first thing he or she would tell you is that? Wouldn't that really stick with you for a very long time? Or Carter the most, because Carter was just an asshole. Like, Carter, honestly, I wish Carter was the first one to die. Like, if any of the characters I wanted to die the most, it was Carter. He does die, but we're not getting there yet. Like, yeah, so how Todd dies, he accidentally gets hanged in a shower, which I will admit, that is definitely one of the most creative deaths of the film. But his death gets ruled as a suicide, and so Alex and Claire sneak into the funeral home to examine Todd's corpse, and that's where you meet Tony Todd's character in the films, William Bloodworth. It reveals the survivor disrupted Death's plan, and Death is now claiming the lives of those meant to die in the explosion. While discussing their next move at a cafe, the remaining survivors then gather outside. Then Terry, who we run into again when Carter is once again having another argument with Alex again, because that's what he does most of the film. He bitches because he can't go and flip the parrot. I get kicked off. Shut the fuck up. How about that? Terry, instead of like him getting run over by a bus, instead it's Terry who, you know what? If you're gonna bitch about Alex getting kicked off and not getting to go on your stupid Paris trip, they could drop fucking dead if that's when you waste your life. And then she gets randomly hit by a bus after that. Of any of the first two that should have died, I wish either one of them was Carter. Instead, either one of them. Like, what? Terry, on the other hand, she was There wasn't much to her character, so there's just not much of a reaction on me when she died. Then, of course, after a news report that caused the explosion, watching a news report about the cause of the explosion, Alex deduces that Duff is reclaiming the survivors so that he can claim their attendant deaths on the plane. But he's too late, though, to save Miss Luton. Because, like, when he tries to prevent her death, she calls the police. She sees this, calls the police on him. But then he gets released because there's no evidence of him. And he's too late to save her because the house then explodes. He gets stabbed by a falling kitchen knife fall. To be fair, her computer screen blows up and slips and cuts her throat. And that's what leads to the kitchen knife death. I'd say that and Todd's deaths were the most creative deaths of the film. And then the remaining survivors reunite as they drive. Carter is enraged by Terry's death, which technically was his own fault, for wasting his time arguing with Alex being a brat. He drives recklessly and stops on a track by an oncoming train so he can die on his own terms. But after the others escape, Carter decides, nah, fuck that, I don't want to die, I'm getting out. His seatbelt jams. Honestly, should have just let him die, but Alex manages to save him despite the fact that this guy just bitched and argued with him over a stupid Paris trip most of the film. But before the car is destroyed, the shrapnel from the wreckage then decapitates Billy, Sean Williams, who ironically is played by a Stifler from American Pie, Sean William Scott. Ironically, and kind of ironic. And Alex realizes that by intervening in Carter's death, the sequence moved to himself. Right there. So, in a way, instead of like Carter dying, it's Billy. Now, Billy's kind of like, Billy's kind of the moron of the characters. He's kind of the goof. Because he's played by a comedic actor named Sean William Scott, who played Stifler in American Pie. So, it would make sense for this guy to be kind of the goof of the goof of all the characters, in a way. But still has a serious, but still kind of has those scared of dying moments, in a way. But he actually also does seem he also is pretty sympathetic to Alex. Like, the guy just seems kind of like, well, when he gets involved in this whole thing, he just kind of seems more, well, confused, really, as to what is really going on. And of course, it does seem like he was a little bit concerned for Alex, so he was the other character I did actually feel kind of sorry for. Him and Todd actually were the most sympathetic of the side characters. Then, like, the acting varies. Like, Devon Sawa easily does give a great performance as Alex. I think Alex is a good protagonist. And Ali Lautner does give a good performance as Clear Rivers. And Tony Todd gives a creepy cameo because the late Tony Todd gives a creepy cameo easily. He always does such a great job playing such creepy villains all the time. Always does great job at doing that. Always did. He always did. And I also love the characters' surnames. Like, there were good homages to some horror and suspense icons, and the whole plot does get a little unrealistic, but it does capture your mind and keep you guessing what's next and where it's going to head. And the film's pacing really does balance the tension and release. It keeps the viewers on the edge. It's Wone's use of foreshadowing, and editing heightens the sense of unease, and each death scene is crafted, and the audience questions fate's design. Like, when it comes to mortality and death scene, like, Final Destination does explore things like human condition and death being inevitable. The characters' desperate attempts to cheat fate does raise questions, and free will and the consequences of altering destiny. And, like, yeah, the first few deaths, like Todd's bathtub death, Miss Luton's kitchen death, even like the train death that involves Sean William Scott's character, some of the death scenes are pretty creative, in a way. With the kitchen knife impaling her in the chest. And once again, like, these are, the bathroom death and the knife death are very effective because these are realistic deaths that actually can happen to anybody. Right there. Like, this film, like, this first film did well in actually showing what could really happen. That some of these deaths in the first film can happen to anybody. Some of the later films get a little cartoony with the deaths, but these are, like, I'd say these two and the tanning bed death from the third one, which will eventually be reviewed, are actually the most realistic. So, after all these deaths have happened, Alex decides to try to escape death by hiding in a fortified cabin. But then he remembers, like, when he changed seats with two classmates during his premonition, and that's when he realizes that Clear's going to be the next one to die. So, he has to rush to her house to save her. Wayne and Shrek still pursuing because they still think he's a suspect, and they suspect Alice is responsible for the survivors' deaths. Like, there's like one instance when Miss Luton's death, when Alex is in the house, like, he puts his hand on one of the knives, and leaves a bloody footprint, so he's just lucky the house burned that time, because he technically left evidence of himself in that place. So if the house hadn't burned, then these two would have it would have led these two suspicions to actually kind of felt believed. If you know what I'm saying. Right there. So the house burned, so it destroyed all the evidence, but if the house did not burn, then there would be evidence all over it, and Alex would have been fucked, and it would have probably been framed. Alex then finds Clear trapped inside her car, and is surrounded by loose cables that ignite this gasoline leak around her. What does Alex do? He then grabs a cable and allows her to escape from the car just before it explodes. At first it does come, and it kind of does come out as a discarded X-Files episode, but this was kind of supposed to be an X-Files episode at the time, but New Line Cinema decided, this would actually work as a film. Make this a movie instead. So it does feel special, and the influence of the show is actually felt in this whole first entry. It's a dark philosophical way of telling the audience that death could be around any corner, and a set of events could have set a motion that really makes you meet your demise. And you're going to meet your demise very soon. And the character's trying to escape that feels like they're escaping their destiny, what's been planned for them, and are desperate to take control over this part in their life. It's an analogy for staying alive against all the odds. Life itself can throw at you. And it's kind of, even though it does kind of get held down by some mediocre acting, except for Ali Lautner, Tony Todd, and of course Devon Sawa. And it does portray itself as a horror movie because teens die one after the other, but it's smarter than that because it comes with an interesting premise that will grip you. And it barely exists in the whole genre of horror, but the movie has that and it owns it. And whenever I watch these movies, guys, these movies are kind of filmed around where I am from. So, whenever I watch these movies, I always recognize certain areas. Whether the second film, the third film, the fifth film are the areas I recognize the most. In fact, I'm contemplating doing a video this summer, right? Once I look up the locations of where the stuff's been filmed, maybe visiting some of the areas where the death scenes took place, maybe showing you the locations of them, and stuff, because I do recognize some of them. I do recognize some areas. Obviously, the whole death scene in this was actually filmed at a place called Playland. And it was actually filmed on an old roller coaster called the Corkscrew, which has now been replaced by a shitty looking coaster, because Playland's been doing that. They've been getting a lot of great rides, and they've been replacing them with some shitty rides, like Disneyland, for example. Getting rid of cool stuff. Fuck that. Let's give it a bunch of Star Wars hotels that nobody's gonna go fucking see. Nobody's gonna go spend thousands of fucking dollars to go sleep in claustrophobic as fuck areas. Nobody's gonna sleep in that shit, so they took it down. Marvel campuses that nobody gives a fuck about. More Star Wars sequel trilogy bullshit nobody gives a fuck about. Disney, that's kind of like that with Playland. Final Destination 5 was filmed on a bridge I've gone across multiple times. So yeah, I'm familiar with nearly every single location of these films. So that's another thing I should mention. And is this movie a slasher movie? Yeah. But it's got unique in the sense of the killer, because the killer's not Freddy or Jason or Michael. It's an invisible force. It's called death. It's an entity that can never be seen. It's death's just a thing of life. Oops, fucking dropped the DVD, whatever. Let's just finish filming the review. It's something the film can take great advantage of. So, now we get on with the finale. So, how the movie ends. 6 months after saving Clear Rivers, Alex, Clear, and Carter, they travel to Paris to celebrate their survival. So while discussing their ordeal, Alex reveals that Death had never skipped him after saving Clear. That's what Alex was starting to realize. Just as they worry, a bus hurls a parking sign towards a neon sign, and it descends towards Alex. Carter pushes Alex out of the way at the last second, but Alex says, "It wasn't going after me." And Carter says, "Then who's next?" And the sign swings back down towards Carter and kills him. So, yeah. It ends with the most annoying character of the fucking film dying. Good. I never liked this character. He was an asshole. So good. At least he's dead. Wanted to bitch about not going to Paris. Finally got to go to Paris and finally finally died. And died in Paris. So, you got your wish, pal. You got to go to Paris. And you got to be safe for last. I kind of wish you were the first character to die, though. Instead. But whatever. At least the most unlikable one dies. But that's how the first film ends. It ends with that's the end of the movie, or is it? Because the three think they may survive, but it's clear Death is not through with them yet. And it's clear so because one of the worst things about Final Destination 2, one of the reasons why I don't like Final Destination 2, is because Alex ends up dead in the next film from a brick in the face. and Clear was going to be the only survivor till the end of the second film. And that's one of the bad qualities I have with the first film. Every time at the end of the movie, the plots end up being pointless because the lead characters, they always die at the end. Nearly all of them, except for Final Destination 2. Yeah, except sadly for that one. Yeah, one of the second worst one of the series is the only one to not end with any of the leads dying. Any of them. But that's another review, though. Now, would I have any bad qualities with the film? Yeah, I kind of probably would. I do. And the reason why it's not great, because the movie does suffer from, like, the side characters not even really being that interesting or likable. The only side characters that are interesting are Clear Rivers and Todd, and sadly he's the first one to die. Billy, I guess, was alright. I mean, he wasn't an asshole or anything, and Tony Todd's character was definitely the most interesting of all the side characters, and he's only for like one part, sadly. The teacher became just bitchy after the whole plane crash, and pretty much acted ungrateful towards Alex, which would probably scar a student for life, and probably make them cannot wait to graduate and get out of that class quick. Or Carter spends most of the film bitching about not going to Paris. But why, though? Paris seems like a lame place to visit. Right there. So that's one problem. And it's how some of the deaths progress through the film, like, because, like, Clear's is a ton of death scene. Like, there's just no build-ups to the death scene. And how ridiculous it gets done with the pool and the blowing winds. Like, I wish it could have been, like, Todd's death or Miss Luton's death or Terry's death. Like, those deaths were creative. Or it takes place in a single place or room with objects around. Like, it's kind of where the movie just gets unrealistic after that. And these two detective characters are idiots because these two detectives actually think some teen would have the mind and strategy to do all these things or somehow blow up an airplane. Even though he clearly does not look like he has anything in his hands at all. So it just makes no sense. And there are some half-baked ideas and some plots in here that are just never really fully well developed. It isn't nearly as inventive, and it just doesn't really get as inventive as the third or fifth films. But I can't really fall for that because this one's meant to be the most realistic. Wait, it's not meant to be like over cartoony like some of the badder ones do. Yeah, like the fucking 4 film, which is such a piece of shit. Other than those, Final Destination 1, it's a nice little Teen B horror film that kicked off the 2000s era of horror. So in the end, I would definitely stream Final Destination for those that want a nice little teen horror film that kicked off a major horror franchise and kicked off the 2000s era of horror films with some very creative deaths. Anyways, that's it for my review of Final Destination. If we're not going to Final Destination, here's how I'm going to rank this movie. So overall, if you are a fan of fun little teen horror films with creative death scenes and want to see what revolutionized the 2000s era of horror films, then I would totally stream Final Destination for some cool death scenes because it does suffer from some huge problems, so it's not that great of a film. And if we're not hungry Final Destination, I'm going to give Final Destination a 7 out of 10. Alright, there we go, guys. That wraps up my review for the first film, so next watch. Sadly, a not good sequel is what came next. Not a good way to start off the sequels. No. Yeah. But yeah, I want to know in the comments down below what you guys think of the first Final Destination film, whether you like this movie, whether you love this movie, whether you hated this movie. And until then, that'll be it for this review. Thank you all for watching. If you like this, want to see more, don't forget to subscribe to Don G. Corleone.